Hey you guys, what's going on? My name is Reed the Writer. So, you saw my title. Star Wars. Star Wars. I remember Star Wars. Do you remember Star Wars? I'll just throw some images of Star Wars right here. Do you guys want to hear the song? Alright, since no one asked. Dun, dun. No, I'm not about to do all that. It's too much work. Y'all don't want to hear me sing. So, Star Wars. All I have been seeing every single day on my TikTok is Star Wars the Acolyte. People are upset. People are mad. I was so intrigued by all the controversy because I am a Star Wars fan. You can almost say I'm not a diehard, but I do love me some Star Wars. I love Star Wars so much that back when I was 6 years old, one of my most favorite games I played off of the Xbox was Star Wars The Old Republic. Any people out there who play that game, you know what I'm talking about. Because in the game, you essentially get to go throughout the galaxy, solve issues. You're like a Padawan, Jedi, something, right? And you basically get to go on missions and decide whether you're going to do the right thing or the bad thing. It's basically user choice on the whole entire game. And me being me, I went to the dark side. Because it was better over there. I liked being over there. It was great. I was like, Anakin, I'm here. Alright. But yeah, I do. I love me some Star Wars. But I've also accepted, because on this channel, I have to be real. I have to be real on this channel. I have accepted that Star Wars, the Star Wars of my youth, the Star Wars of my childhood, because the last Star Wars that was made and produced by Lucasfilm before Lucasfilm was purchased by Disney, like that Lucasfilm was 2005. That was Star Wars for me, and I remember it fondly. I really do. I remember being a tiny little girl, little baby, going into the theater, waiting in the lines, holding my mom and my dad's hand, watching people dress up, go to the theaters, just the overall experience of watching Revenge of the Sith. Little kid, I was a little baby kid, but I remember that, and that was such an awesome experience. But I've accepted as a Star Wars fan, which I think a lot of you guys should do as well, is that Star Wars owned and made and created by Lucasfilm, by George Lucas, those days are gone. It's been over since 2005. It's been almost 20 years. It's over. And the minute Star Wars was purchased by Disney, the corporation, it became Star Wars Disney. Can you guys follow me on that? So there once was Star Wars owned by Lucasfilm. Now we have Star Wars Lucasfilm, but Disney. It's Star Wars Disney. So anytime you guys say Star Wars, throw in a heavy Mickey Mouse sign. He's right there. Mickey Mouse is cuddling Darth Vader. Like, that's what it is. And I think as Star Wars fans, if you're going to continue to be a fan, you have to just either A, accept that fact, or B, move on like the rest of us have already. And I don't think that all the Star Wars products since 2005 have been that bad, like that horrible. Granted, Rey being a Palpatine coming back from the dead. Yo, I will do a whole video. I really will do a breakdown video on Finn, on how I feel as if they let down everyone on Finn. Finn is the biggest letdown that I'd ever seen. A stormtrooper who could have turned into a Jedi. And just imagining if they would have had the costume and everything on point. Him in his stormtrooper rogue outfit, right? With a lightsaber? Bruh, come on. It would have been like the Red Guards. It would have been on 10. And he's using the Force. They had a story there. They had a story. My gosh, they had a story, and it hurts that they had it. They didn't know what to do with this man. They fumbled. And I'm sorry, Finn. Who's the actor? It was John Bottega. They fumbled John Bottega. They just fumbled that man. But back to the Acolyte. Everyone is upset about this show. It's kind of like a mixed bag. We have a populace that is vitriol. They hate what's happening with the Acolyte. There's also another population that are okay with the show. I wouldn't call them diehard fans. I know a lot of people call them normies, but like I guess normies, Star Wars fans who actually do engage with the show. There is that margin, and they do like what's happening with Star Wars. Then you have people like me, more so in the middle. I'm kind of on the higher end, but more so in the middle, who will pass by a Star Wars like a show just out of curiosity to see what's going on, and typically dip out after like episode 1 or 2 or 3 of the show. But I like to give a lot of Star Wars shows a chance. Like I recently accidentally watched 1 episode of Andor, and Andor is a gem. That is a gem. But then you start getting into some of the other stuff, like someone told me to check out Boba Fett, and yo, what was that? What was Boba Fett? And half of it wasn't even Boba Fett. Half of it was Grogu. Like it went into the Mandalorian to promote the Mandalorian, and the Mandalorian was good. Season 1 of Mandalorian was great. Season 2 was okay. Season 3, I don't know why Lizzo and Jack Black was there, but you know, I like to give Star Wars a chance. I always like to just dip a little bit into the dark side and just see what's happening in there. And when I see Palpatine, that's when it's my time to go. when he resurrects himself from the dead. Makes no sense. But yeah, so far with the Acolyte, what I can say, I did check out episode 1 and 2. A little bit of 3, but by then I got lost around with the witches. Even though there are witches lore, there are witches in the Star Wars, but just what was presented, it was just a little bit uncanny for me. The show had potential. The show still does. It's just, I would say the biggest hurdle for me would be just the writing, and overall, I would say the public perception that Disney is presenting to us of the Jedi has been diminished. Like the mystique and the magic and the wow factor and the awe that the Jedi used to possess, especially once you go back to Luke Skywalker, and I would say even with Obi-Wan and that first fight scene between Obi-Wan and Darth Vader, you know, especially, you know, you start going back to that. There was such a mystique and a mysterious nature to the Star Wars and lightsabers, and it was so fascinating. Then once you got to the prequels, like let's go to like Revenge of the Sith. The Jedi could fight. Like the Jedi really were badass. I don't know if I can say this on this channel. Whatever, it's my channel. Badass. They were really badass fighters. Like, I encourage you guys to go back and watch Yoda fighting Dooku. Like, those fight scenes were top tier, especially at the very end with Yoda fighting Palpatine, when Palpatine was already in his like dark mode with his like, you know, hood on. Incredible fight. Like, you could actually feel the intensity of what they were doing. It was passionate. But going into the Acolyte, I would say just the soft nature of who the Jedi are right now that I've been seeing, especially in the Old Republic. It's kind of embarrassing a little bit. Not even a little bit, it is embarrassing. It's just, I don't know. I feel as if Disney is trying to take a very cushioned approach with the Jedi. And with the Force, they're so lax with it without realizing that this world in whole is a battle between darkness and the light. And because there is a forever battle, there's a lot of tragedy in it. There's a lot of death. There's murder. There's assassins. You know, you have clones, multiple personalities. You have betrayal. A lot of those things, redemptions. Even if you go back to Anakin's story, you have slavery with him and his mother. All those conditions make the Star Wars universe a very realistic, grounded world that I think Disney's kind of just missing out on. Like, just the grunge factor. Even when I was watching the Acolyte, I was watching, like, episode 1. And it wasn't bad. Episode 1 was okay. Episode 2 was fine. But when I was just looking at their clothing and how pristine it was, then comparing it back to the prequels, I was like, okay, there's something missing here. It feels more like a show rather than you jumping into a realistic, weighted world that you could dive into. But yeah, after the twin situation and the Force impregnating this woman and this other woman, and it's just like it's just so many just different layers to the story. Then one of the twins killed her witch coven and with fire, and it's just, you know, then we have a Smilo Ren. I don't really know what the direction is. Then I don't know. There's a lot going on. It's a lot to dissect with Acolyte. But I found this article, and this video is going to be long just because I do love Star Wars. I do love having these in-depth talks, especially when it comes to writing and storytelling, because that's my bread and butter. I'm a writer, so I like to go into deep with stories. And my writing, how I typically do write, if I'm doing like poetry or short stories or children's books or anything like that, I do like to have a very open-end, grounded, I like to write open-end, grounded stories where you do get to see characters for their best and for their worst. So, you know, I like those comparisons, but just the Acolyte is just, it could have been interesting with the Old Republic. It could have been something fascinating, because we've yet to explore the Old Republic. There are stories in there. There are stories with the Jedi Knights. That's a possibility. That could have been a gateway into that. There's also Mandalore. There, you know what I'm saying? There's just other things to have explored 100 years before we got to the Skywalker trilogy, until we hit that era. But I don't know. But yeah, I found this article. It's by Forbes, and I don't like being on the Forbes website because it's littered with ads. But the guy who wrote this article did a fantastic job. Especially if you like Star Wars, I highly encourage you guys to go watch it. I'll try to put the link down below in the description box. But the title of the article is "The Acolyte Continues a Long, Tragic Star Wars Tradition, Ruining the Jedi." So I'm going to read bits and pieces of the articles because the article is long. I don't know if y'all want to be here. Y'all will be here with me, but I still want to be here all day just reading it. But there's some points he made that really hit home with me that I actually really do like. So I'm going to read this to you guys, and as I'm reading, I'm going to also have an open-end discussion where I'll just share my thoughts. We go back and forth on it, okay? Let's get into it. Star Wars. Yes. Yes. Long, long time ago. Yes. Go back to 2011. Yes. Okay. Remember the Jedi? Oh, remember when the Jedi were cool? I do. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. It's been such a very, very long time, long before Disney took over Lucasfilm and Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and the Willow IP. Because in that buyout for Star Wars, it included like a group package of everything that George Lucas created, which was Indiana Jones, Willow, and Star Wars. So that's why you keep seeing those three movies or those three archetypes of shows or TV shows, movies coming out, because they own all that. I've had this thought running through my head lately. You can have too much of a good thing, and I agree. It's the whole less is more notion, and it applies in a very big way, not just to Star Wars, but to a lot of beloved genre fiction. So, for example, and in this example, they're using Gladel. And if you guys remember, Gladel is from Lord of the Rings. On the left, you have a young Gladel from the Rings of Power. And Rings of Power is a show produced by Amazon, played by Morfydd Clark, bedecked in heavy plate armor, wearing a fancy elven blade on her back. On the right, we have Cate Blanchett, Elven Queen from the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings trilogy. So the Lord of the Rings movies, Gladel is presented as a faithfully to the source material as is humanly possible. She is beautiful, ethereal, and mysterious. She is at once a source of courage for the Fellowship and somewhat terrifying when she meets with Frodo by her mirror. And just a pause right there, that scene with Gladel and Frodo, and it's kind of like, what would you even call it? It is like a pool of water. I'd say pool of water. And you get to see Gladel's like evil version of herself that's been like corrupted by the ring. That scared me as a kid, but it was so beautifully done by Cate, because that scene kind of just shows the double side of Gladel's character. One, her being an elven queen, prestigious, high court, almost godlike. Then in the flip side, you get to see just how the darkness of the ring can pollute even just the most beautiful flower. I'm a writer. This is why I can talk like this, you guys. I'm a writer. Okay. She is not in very many scenes, and she doesn't have many lines. But her presence in the films looms large, and you don't forget her, and you don't. She did such a wonderful job. But it was also Peter Jackson who did a fantastic job of matching the book as closely to the cinema, to the actual film. But Peter Jackson, he did an interview about that. But how he has so much reverence for the Tolkien books, and how he did not want to portray his thoughts and his feelings and his interpretation of what Tolkien created. He wanted to put the closest match to Tolkien's imagination on screen, and he did that with Lord of the Rings, that trilogy. He killed it. And it said, in the Rings of Power, Gladel is transformed into a chief protagonist, and in doing so is much diminished. She is a warrior here, the general of the northern armies. She is robbed of her power, so much of which came from how little we truly understand her in the books and the films. She's like an angel or a demigod, removed from conflict, apart from it, though certainly still consequential in the bigger scheme. And that's kind of, and what he's doing, this writer, I'm gonna look up the guy who actually wrote the article, Erik Kain. What he's doing is he's comparing the prestige of Gladel from the Peter Jackson movies and from the books, how magnificent that was done and portrayed, and just like the magic of who Gladel is, and how that was diminished in Rings of Power, how Amazon took away that essence, that spell, that lore that we loved from the Peter Jackson trilogies, from the books. And what it comes down to is self-inserting. But let me keep reading. On the left we have, let me keep reading. Let me go a little bit down, because this is good. The less Gladel, the more Gladel. And the same applies to the Jedi, all of which brings to something that's been bothering me since the prequel films. The more Jedi we're given on screen, the less awesome they become. That's not to say that a young Obi-Wan Kenobi wasn't cool, or that I didn't enjoy Darth Maul, but as more movies have come out, and more shows like Obi-Wan Kenobi and Ahsoka arrive only to fall flat, the Jedi have just gotten less and less compelling. I didn't hate old and bitter Luke Skywalker from the sequels, but the movies failed to really give him a worthwhile story. He didn't earn the rush redemption arc he was given. Face it, Luke's story was over in Return of the Jedi, and maybe so was the story of the Jedi. And what can I say from that is I do agree in essence a little bit. Because truly, yes, once you get to, Luke Skywalker's story, there was so little bit known about the Jedi because we're basing the story off of Luke's perspective and his accountability for the world that he lived in. And it really was from the ground, we're watching this young child, like man, young adult, find himself in the midst of these rebel wars, against this higher force, this higher power, him discovering the Force, the lightsabers, and receiving this training to fight the dark side. But there was still so little just known about it. So as Luke Skywalker was going through his training and meeting Yoda and becoming a Jedi, the lore and the mystery of who the Jedi were, we were still discovering it with Luke as he was also discovering it. So it made everything so much more appealing and exciting and tantalizing, because you didn't understand the story. We didn't know what this was. I'm talking like I was there in the 70s. I wasn't, but just from me watching the older sequels, that's the feeling I had when I first watched it. But yes, the more isn't always the better. But I would say this also, just to counteract what he said, what he wrote. You can have more if you know how to tell the story. If Disney truly had a clear understanding of the Jedi, they didn't base everything as a franchise money-making machine, and they hired writers on scene, besides like Favreau and Filoni. Like, I give them like B's and C's in terms of what they were writing for their work on Star Wars, their production value. But if they truly had people who were immersed in the Star Wars franchise, in the world, in the lore, in the books, and the comics and everything, and they transitioned that into film, right? If you really work with me, if they transitioned that film, it would have been something like marvelous. It could have been something great. And I'll still say this. The Acolyte, yes, was a fall off. But is the Old Republic, is there still stories within there with the Old Republic Jedi? are there stories there? Hundreds. Because, like I said, I played those games. Those games are embedded into my memory. I have great fondness with that. Because there's so many things and so many different planets and there's so many different stories in that world that could have been told. But yet we're getting whatever the Acolyte is. It's just, not saying the Acolyte is dreadful, but it's just, it could have been something better. But is more better? It can be depending on who's telling the story. And I stand by that. Here we go. It goes, it's writing over at IGN. A very good piece that the Acolyte Jedi line. I'm kind of paraphrasing through. He notes that as the franchise has evolved, removing the mystery of the Jedi has also hobbled the power of the legendary warriors from storytelling and dramatic standpoint. Not everyone can be Luke Skywalker after all. And let's do a pause right there because this is getting pretty good. Not everyone can be a Luke Skywalker. I 100% agree. Rey was an attempt of a carbon copy of who Luke Skywalker was. And she was. That's what it was. And they pretty much, especially with the Death Star, that's all her version with Rey and Finn, and that Star Wars, that's what it was. It to me, it just felt like a flip of how can we turn this wheel and get some money in and start generating more interest into Star Wars, like how they did it in like the mid 2000s. That's what it felt like. It didn't feel like organic, free flowing art, essentially, and that's what Star Wars is. It felt forced, lost, and almost like they were just doing member berries with the Rey Star Wars. That's what it felt like. But yes, Luke Skywalker, there was only one. There was only one Anakin. There was only one Obi-Wan. Those stories is great, but it did end with the prequels. And I think that's another thing Disney has to accept. They have to move on. There's nothing left for them to tell in the Skywalker trilogy world. We've seen it all. We've seen the video games, because there's multiple video games. We've seen it in the stories. It's over. They have to get past milking the Skywalker franchise. There's nothing else left to milk. And it's time for them to either go into the past, which there's tons of stories. If you go online, people want to see I don't know if I say it right, a Revan story. People want to see the dark side. People are interested in Palpatine's story of how he was trained by the dark side and him killing his master. There's also a story there. There's tons of stories. Or what they could even do if they had the creativity, I'm pretty sure they could if they hired the right people. They could create a new Star Wars branch, something different than what we have over here, and start something fresh and new. But they would have to be brave enough to take the chance. But they've also smudged the brand, milking what George Lucas has already created. Because like I said, you can't keep on milking this. No more Han Solos. We're done with Padme. We've seen Anakin. Ahsoka was nice. The show was okay, but that was Clone Wars. We've already seen Ahsoka's story. It's just, gotta move on. This is on stark display in the Acolyte's 5th episode when 5 fully trained Jedi are taken out in a few seconds. I didn't see the episode. I did see a lot of people talking about it online, and I did see a clip of it, and that was hilarious. That made me laugh. The Master, whereas the Padawan, Jackie Lawn, though she's eventually snuffs it out, writes, we don't know exactly how Jedi, number 1, brought the moist farm, and he's already lying in the jungle dead. As the episode starts, Keldor, like Plo Koon from prequel era, gets the Master's saber right in the back. Moments later, Jedi number 3 is sliced across his belly. Jedi 4 is impaled by the Master's lightsaber. And then for a finishing move, the Master Force pulls Jedi 5 onto his blade while it's still kicking out of number 4's back before swinging. So it's just going over the whole fight scene, how outlandish it is. On top of this, he points out that Carrie Ann's Moss Master Indra was killed in the first few minutes of the show by a tiny little baby knife. No less. The other Jedi Masters, including the Wookiee Jedi, I don't want to say his name wrong, so I won't say it, but the Wookiee, he died instantly, and the 10 Jedi slaughtered already in the show. And Soul, very nearly one of them. The Jedi are basically terrible at this. And that was a lot of the talk. All the Jedi they presented in the Acolyte, who were supposedly big and bad, they died so quickly by one Sith or Darth. We still don't know. This guy with a mask, very similar to Kylo Ren. But essentially all the Jedi went out too easily. So it goes, Obi-Wan Kenobi told Luke about the Jedi of yore, who you might recall were for over 1,000 generations the guardians of peace and the justice of the old republic. The Order sounded so awesome, so mysterious, and so legendary. The mysticism of the Jedi Order combined with the few scraps of knowledge we had about them, they fought in something called the Clone Wars to create a mythic era that was always going to be hard to satisfyingly recognize on screen. So yeah, there's more to this article. I could read the rest, but I feel like that's just like a good ender right there. Just closing out for this video, because I don't want to be here all day with this. But yeah, the Jedi, from what I've gathered and what I've seen, do have a weaker presence here in on Disney. And I always like to go back to Clone Wars, especially to let me go to it. Let me see if I can find the Ahsoka. Okay, yeah. Let me go back to Ahsoka and her training when she was being trained by Anakin. There was something so powerful about those scenes, Ahsoka being a young Padawan and her going through that training. Especially there's a really awesome scene where she at first began fighting with one lightsaber, and she had a droid, like Anakin had multiple droids firing at her, and she was failing one after another. Then he replaced the droids with the training droids with actual like stormtroopers, and multiple people were attacking her at once, and her learning to fight with 2 lightsabers, and just seeing her agility and the quickness and the fierceness of Ahsoka's fighting. There's also another scene of her, like, I can't remember, I think it was like the Battle of Mandalore, where she jumps off a plane, right? And she starts stabbing people with her lightsaber, and how cool and how awesome it was. It's just like, it was so freaking fierce, and that was like, it was a kid's show. show, Star Wars Clone Troopers, was so freaking awesome. Just those fight scenes alone. But when I think of that, and like I said, when I think of like Mace Windu, and I think of Palpatine and when he was fighting Yoda, and that like battle scene between Darth Maul and Obi-Wan, and just the fierceness of who the Jedi were, it was clean. It was clean. There was so much heaviness and presence in the way they fought. Especially like one of the greatest cinematic fight scenes, I claim by that, which is Obi-Wan versus Darth Anakin, or Darth Vader, when he became Darth Vader, before he had the whole suit on. That like 10-15 minute fight scene, just the aggressiveness of how they fought back in the day compared to Disney's fight scenes, you can't compare them. Like, the weight isn't there. Like, I don't even really feel it in my spirit all the way. It's just, you know, when they were fighting, they fought with everything that was in them, and it was real. They were really trying to kill you. And that was like the coolness of George Lucas's Star Wars. But like I said, you guys, are we ever going to get that version of Star Wars again? I'm gonna say no currently, and this is due to the head over Disney, which is Kathleen Kennedy. Her pushing the female force, which there's always been women in Star Wars, especially with Padme. Like, we've always seen that. Princess Leia. We've always had strong women forces. Ahsoka, they've always been there. They've always been there. I think Ahsoka's actually one of the best fighters in Star Wars. She's not the greatest. Like, she's high up there. But in terms of her technology, her ability to fight and how technical she was, and how loose she was, especially in her fighting scenes. Like, she was almost like an acrobat. Are we ever going to get that again? No, currently. Disney has an opportunity. They can always change. They can always choose to, instead of insert themselves into Star Wars, they can actually change the mindset and disappreciate it. And that's why I have so much love for Peter Jackson. And that's what I'm saying. I might have to post it maybe on this channel one of these days, but Peter Jackson had an interview on his take in creating the Lord of the Rings franchise, and he stated that he made such a point to not put himself into the films. And I think Disney can absolutely do the same exact thing. They can take a step back from self-insertion and choosing to put all these things into Star Wars. Like, it's like a stew. They don't have to add anything to the stew. The stew's already good. People like the flavor. People like the taste of this particular stew. They love it. You don't have to change it. But them changing the recipe is causing people to leave the franchise or become haters of it, or incredibly bitter of it. Rightfully so, though. But yet Disney has an opportunity, if they wanted to, it's up to them, to go back to the original recipe, to hire writers who can look at this, not want to insert, directors who want to keep as close to the guidelines that they've been given, and just put that on screen. For me, how I view it, you guys, it's an easy copy paste, boom. Like, you don't even have to even do anything. Like, you just, people like this, okay, boom, put it on the screen. People like the Eternal Twins, boom, let's get that, put that exactly how it was in the video game, put that on the screen. People like that. To me, none of this is that complicated. With the Acolyte, they could base things off of the old video game, the Old Republic. There's so much stuff. There's so much out. Boom, put that out on the screen. Get something similar to it. Have more dialogue. Have Jedi. Add in some of the knights. easy, put on the screen, you'll have 1 billion people show up to go watch it. Super easy, super simple. This franchise and alone, Star Wars, is already hot because when they purchased it, it already had an immediate fan base for life. There's so many diehard Star Wars fans out there. Like, every year there's always going to be someone who dresses up as Darth Vader and the Clone Troopers. It's done. But I just think Disney just has to stop putting their salts and their seasonings and like this stew tastes good. We didn't ask. Nobody asked for you to put pink Himalayan salt in the stew. Get it out. We don't like that. But yeah, it's just, yeah, it's, to me, it still hurts a little bit just to see what's going on with the Acolyte. But yeah, that's just where we're at. But yeah, if you're going to move forward with Star Wars, you have to just accept that it's not going to be the George Lucas Star Wars that you grew up with. It's gone. It's over. It's done. And whatever they do make now, there is a set of people who do enjoy this. So it's just, that's just where we're at right now. To me, I'm not bothered. I don't really mind or care. If I do think of Star Wars, I do go back and watch some of the old shows, cartoons, Clone Troopers, or Clone Wars, Phantom Menace. I might go back and watch that. But other than that, it's just, you know, my heart's just not in it the way it used to be when I was a child. But that's what it is. But yeah, if you've been watching The Acolyte, you can tell me down below. What are your thoughts on the show so far? How do you feel about it? How do you feel about the twins? Do you feel like the characters are fleshed out enough? I'm going to say with the Jedi, it could have slowed it down a little bit more. And I also believe that, especially now, as I will be pursuing writing more stories and going to that direction, I don't always think it's always in the best will to make men the weaker of any counterpart. I think men and women can both be strong. And I think it's important to showcase not only that the Force is female, but the Force is also with men. It can be with both. I think it's just a matter of telling the good story. But that would have been nice to have seen that in the Acolyte. To have brought more of that Force present. And yeah, I would say just with, like, some of the fight scenes aren't too bad. Some things aren't bad. Like I said, episode 1 and 2 of The Acolyte isn't horrible, isn't horrendous. It does have some potential, but like I said, just the fall off the witches and everything else, it threw me for a loop. But yeah, tell me your thoughts below on The Acolyte. Are you watching the show? Have you given up? Have you moved on? Do you not care about Star Wars anymore? Or do you just have a fondness of the classics? But yeah, I'd be very curious to see your thoughts down below. But yeah, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. And I will be here with you guys for another movie, video, entertainment take on whatever I find on TikTok. But yeah, I appreciate you guys so much just for being here. And thank you so much. I appreciate you guys.